Hello everyone, my name is Brad Harker and this is my Tribe Talk for Revolutionary Leader for the Raymond A. Mason School of Business, College of William and Mary. I currently live in Beijing, China and serve as a Foreign Service Officer at the U.S. Embassy here in Beijing. I believe few cities and countries can match the pulse of what is happening here. Beijing is the economic and cultural center of the country, home to not only the Great Wall, the Forbidden City, but is also leading China in the 21st century. It hosted the 2008 Winter Olympic Games and will also host the 2022 Winter Olympic Games. Economic growth in China over the last 40 years has been astonishing. It has created opportunity for hundreds of millions of Chinese, but has also been at the expense of the environment in many, many ways. The focus of the Chinese government in particular over this period has been to move people from the rural areas into cities. It is expected by 2030 that there will be 23 cities in China with more than 5 million residents each. This has required a tremendous amount of infrastructure. Here's the Beijing subway in 2000, and here it is today. And this doesn't include the 43 additional cities in China that are building metros, not to mention the high-speed rail network that is now traverses the country from the equivalent of Miami to Boston, west to Chicago, and south to Dallas, and everywhere in between. This focus on manufacturing and economic growth at all cost has produced results. The Chinese economy by 2025 is expected to be at or greater than the United States. So this brings me to my problem statement, my wicked problem statement, which namely is air pollution and environmental degradation the price that China must pay to maintain its high levels of economic growth and social stability in the country? Here's Beijing on a clear day from satellite. In the south, there is where much of the heavy industry is, from steel, aluminum, concrete, glass, petrochemical. And when the southerly winds blow in, so does the pollution. This is the rooftop of the U.S. Embassy on a clear day. And here it is when the pollution rolls in. The impacts are numerous, not to mention the impacts on health of the population, which I'll get to later. So the current situation and impact, really, on virtually every single day when I get up in the morning, I look to check and see what the weather's doing, particularly which way the wind is blowing. And it is quite interesting to note, and this is an analysis I did during one of our statistics classes, which was taking a look at the correlation between northerly winds and southerly winds. Southerly winds blow the pollution, here's the AQI level, the air quality index level, in from the south, versus northerly winds in blue dots mean it's typically going to be a low pollution day. Here's an image from just last winter where we had a particularly bad period. Anything over 500 is considered beyond index. And so that is the equivalent of having a very thick fog of what you might see in Boston, but it's not fog, it's actual very, very high levels of pollution. Here's a quick video of what it looks like when the pollution blows in from the south. This was just last December. And on that day it hit over 603, which is roughly 30 times the standard for clean air set by the World Health Organization. In the United States, by comparison, typically most cities do not exceed 50 on any given day. In China, you will routinely see days in the 150 to 200 range, and especially in the winter, you will hit those very high levels of sometimes even beyond index. This is a quick note from this was a newspaper article that came out a few weeks ago that focused on the pollution in Delhi in India, but it also showcases just what the impacts are in China, with over 1.5 million fatalities from pollution, and also the impacts on health and children. In fact, there was an OECD report that states that the pollution crisis in China through 2060 is equivalent to several $1 trillion in lost economic output from China as a result of high levels of sick days and the treatment that's required in the hospital to treat pollution-related and cancer-related illnesses. The forces and factors that are contributing to the pollution crisis in China are many. First, it is the continued consumption of raw coal at the local level for heating and for cooking, especially in rural areas. Second, it's the rampant expansion of coal-fired power plants for power generation in the country. A recent report stated that an additional 155 coal-fired power plants are currently planned for construction between now and 2020. This would, if implemented, account for more than 40% of the U.S. grid, or 400 gigawatts of additional coal-fired capacity. Another factor is the lax environmental standards, particularly laws and regulations that are on the books are not being followed by Chinese industry. A report that I read stated that the managers of some factories will turn off the scrubbers at night when the inspectors cannot visibly see the smoke coming out of the smokestack. So this is all in an effort to save money, because running these scrubbers on their smokestacks are quite expensive. Another factor is economic. If you can run a factory in China, for example, making blue jeans, and you don't have to treat the water from dyeing those jeans, then you're able to produce those jeans at much lower rates than you would be able to do in other industrialized nations. But certainly there is a cost. So for my approach to solving this problem is really it's multiple-fold. First, it is to really showcase how the United States, after enacting the Clean Air Act in 1970, has been able to dramatically reduce the levels of pollution in our own country. Since 1970, we've been able to, as you can see from the graph, we've been able to reduce pollution levels by 70%. The shale gas revolution has also helped us to move away from coal, particularly in transitioning our coal-fired power plants to natural gas. Starting this year, we actually began exporting liquefied natural gas, and I believe that this ability of the United States to export LNG to the rest of the world, including China, can be a major driving factor in helping China, for example, to begin to wean itself from coal-fired power generation. In this regard, my intent is to work to develop a U.S.-China pollution summit that would convene next June in Beijing, that would really that would focus on our success stories. Here is an image of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, circa 1980. At that time, Pittsburgh was one of the most polluted cities in the United States, arguably on the planet, with an industrial base focused heavily on steelmaking. This is Pittsburgh today, after implementing aggressive policies to not only transition its economy away from heavy industry, but also to clean up its environment, including water and air. So it's really a showcasing cities like Pittsburgh that have transitioned away from heavy industry. There is still steel making in Pennsylvania, but it is done in a much cleaner way. Executing this plan, I will be working with a number of institutions. First, I will be working closely with U.S. industry. The U.S. Department of Commerce estimates that the environmental technology market and environmental remediation market in China exceeds several $100 billion. As we work to address the tremendous trade deficit between the U.S. and China, I believe that exports of U.S. products, technologies, and services to help China reduce its pollution crisis is one area that we can absolutely and should focus on to assist U.S. companies to do so. I will need to work closely with the U.S. government and the Chinese government as I look to implement this plan to host this summit in Beijing next summer. In this regard, I'll be working closely not only with my team at the U.S. Embassy, but also with the other sections of the U.S. At the U.S. Embassy, including the political, economic, and ambassador's office. I will also be working with NGOs who are active in China and who are in the process of drafting reports, a roadmap, if you will, to help China begin to address its pollution crisis. I've also recently approached the Beijing Winter Olympic Committee. This is the committee that will host the 2022 Winter Olympic Games. They've recently converted a massive industrial brownfield, which was a steel mill, into their headquarter office, which is an astonishing transition going from something that really represented one of the most polluted sites in Beijing to now this amazing facility that will actually host several of the sports events. In fact, the snowboard competition will be built. If you can see here, here's one of the old cooling towers for the steel mill making process. There'll actually be a ramp here, and they will do part of the big air competition off of the top of one of the cooling towers. So absolutely amazing. So in conclusion, I believe the time is ripe for the United States to assist China to begin to amend its pollution and environmental degradation, particularly by using our own roadmap as we moved from 1970 to today and cleaned up our own environment. I believe that the pollution summit next summer can be just one spark that can help move the country forward. I hope to see that the trend line of lower levels of pollution in Beijing can continue. Here's a quick analysis I did of the pollution levels. I'm hoping to see much lower peaks as we move forward, and I believe that again the pollution summit can be just one solution to help China move in that direction. And really, that's where we want to go. We want to go from moving from many days in China, in Beijing, where you have extremely high levels of pollution like this, to where we have in the United States, where most cities are under 50 for the air quality index. So with that, I'd like to thank you for not only the opportunity to share with you my presentation for this class, but really for the last 2 years. I've learned so much from you and from many of my classmates. It's been an honor to go through this MBA program with you all. So with that, I'd like to thank you, and I'd welcome your comments.